1920s. This shot is actually the opening of the Collins Bridge, as some of you may well know from 1913. Back in the 1920s, parking and traffic congestion were major concerns of city residents. Miami contained upwards of 175,000 people and grew from having 10,000 to 25,000 cars in about 5 years. In many areas of the city, traffic came to a standstill for long periods. Everything was immovable, complained one visitor who insisted that Miami's traffic jams made the worst congestion of London or New York's Child's Play by comparison, again in the 1920s. In the late 1940s, due to post-war traffic and parking problems, there was a serious debate over turning Bayfront Park into a parking lot and creating a new park out in the water, as some of you may know. So, the subject of tonight's program is in one sense not new. We have a strange sense, in my view, of place here in Miami, in particular related to our abused waterfront. From my experience, I often consider Miami to be a city without a memory. We don't seem to plan well, nor do we adequately contextualize our problems, nor remember our past mistakes. And unlike other major cities, we put little priority on our public spaces. In particular, the politics of waterfront development leaves us fighting rearguard, often exhausting battles such as the Beckham Stadium, and that leaves so many residents cynical about civic engagement. Tonight we're going to be trying to assess some of the problems of our waterfront traffic gridlock with more specific focus on the government processes that have gotten us into the pickle over the 24 surface and submerged acres of Watson Island. Though we could also be talking about the Marine Stadium, Aventura, or Kendall for that matter in one sense. Virginia Key is going to be the subject of another UEL gathering in the near future, and our next program is going to focus on the push for waterfront museums. That's controversial to say the least. The urban environment league, a couple of shots of Watson Island, what it is today, Jungle Island, Miami Children's Museum. There's still a Japanese garden there. Miami Outboard Club, public boat ramps and roads, to say the least. There's a couple of shots. The Urban Environment League was created, just for a minute, back in 1996. Our issues include public inclusion in planning, public space, government transparency. We were involved in the American Airlines arena, a whole series of other struggles over the years, including the urban development boundary line, Parcel B that continues as an issue, etc. This is what we're going to be talking about. A shot of Watson Island. Here's another shot of what we're going to be dealing with in many ways in terms of the traffic coming. And if there's one thing you might take away from this evening without prejudicing this discussion, we hope that you consider that instead of always looking for ways to develop magnificent public spaces, Miami all too often merely seeks commercial enterprises to derive revenue for the city, despite the fact that we have among the lowest per capita park space of any major high-density city in the country. Yet that's my perspective in this. I want to thank Albert Reuter, Albert and I have worked hard over many years to create balanced programs for the Urban Environment League. For tonight's forum, Commissioner Mark Sarnoff had agreed to join our panel, but backed out at the last minute, actually, the last week, citing possible pending legal issues. Not knowing his point of view, but appreciating his long experience, we then asked former Mayor Maurice Ferre to join us and thank him for agreeing to participate at this last moment. So we invite you all to become members of the Urban Environment League if that works for you. Get our forthcoming newsletter, follow our website, and we do thank you for coming. I would like to introduce, at this point, not taking any more time, Paul Schwepp, who is going to be our moderator. Paul's an attorney with the firm of Coffey Burlington, where his practice focuses on business and class action disputes in federal, state courts. He's successfully tried numerous business, contract, and tort disputes, including cases involving distribution agreements, class action, insurance disputes, business and real estate contracts. He also represents environmental organizations in South Florida on environmental matters of national significance. He's a member of the Urban Environment League Board and chair of the Miami-Dade County Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. The reason they've asked me to serve as moderator is because everyone knows I'm a pushover. So, and that I will urge to keep the discourse civil. These are issues about which I know many feel very passionately. And I really thank Greg and thank the panelists for your participation tonight. As Greg mentioned, we had one panelist who had agreed to participate, who is not with us tonight because this isn't for the faint-hearted. And we're grateful. We're grateful, and we really sincerely appreciate everyone's participation. For those in the audience, I know you're here because this is an issue that's important to you, and thank you for coming and participating in this important dialogue. In terms of the format for tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up by asking each of our panelists to make brief introductory remarks. Ask you to keep that within about 5 minutes. I've got a timer, but if you go a little over, that's okay, but try and stay within about 5 minutes. You can use that time however you like. And thereafter, I have some questions that have been formulated by UEL's board and vetted so as to be relatively objective and unbiased. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I do ask that you limit your questions or comments to just a couple of minutes. We have a lot of people here, and I'm sure everybody would like to be heard, and I'm also sure everybody would like to get out of here at a reasonable hour and have dinner. So let me introduce our panelists. We especially thank Maurice Ferre for participating tonight. Mayor Ferre is currently a business consultant, but he is known for a long and extensive public career, including 12 years of service as the mayor of the city of Miami from 1973 to 1985. He served in the Florida House of Representatives. He was a city commissioner at the city of Miami and vice chairman of the Miami-Dade Board of County Commissioners. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority. Commissioner Michael Grieco from the city of Miami Beach is here with us. Commissioner Grieco is a criminal defense attorney. He started his legal career as Miami-Dade Assistant Attorney, and as a prosecutor, he spent the majority of his 6 years on gang and narcotics enforcement before becoming a supervising attorney in the felony division and the chief of that division. He was elected initially to a 4-year term at the city of Miami Beach for Group 2 in 2013, and his current term expires in 2017. Thank you for coming. Steve Herbert is a resident of Venetian Islands. He has been active in opposing the Flagstone project. He has filed lawsuits to obtain records about the project. He's a former executive of the Seagram Company and also a high-level Pentagon consultant with top-level security clearance. So don't ask him anything about the Department of Defense. He and other project critics have launched a site called the Coalition Against Causeway Chaos that opposes the Watson Island development. And finally, Brian May is here with us. Prior to forming his government and public advocacy firm called Floridian Partners in 1998, Mr. May spent a decade working in the state and local governments and at various positions, including as campaign manager, chief of staff, chief strategist of former Miami-Dade Mayor Alex Pinellas, and he served U.S. Senator Bill Nelson in similar positions throughout the senator's career dating back to 1994. He represents Flagstone Island Gardens, the developer for the project. So with that, we organize our panelists in alphabetical order, and I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Ferre.
Thank you very much. Paul, let me start by congratulating you and for those of you that went to the Transportation Summit a week, 10 days ago. It was by far the most successful transportation summit we've had in Miami that I can remember. And it was well done, it was focused and to the point, and I think some positive things will come out. Secondly, I want to, Greg, congratulate you for your persistence and your insistence in the Urban Environmental League's wonderful work, and you're really an indispensable factor in the well-being of Miami. Al Reuter, of course, is an old friend, and he was with me when I was mayor of Miami, and went on to become the director of parks, and probably one of the best director of parks that we've had, and a great public servant. Good to see you. How many of you have read any of T.D. Altman's books about Florida or Miami? One was Miami, the other was Florida. 2, 3, 4. I recommend that you read those books, even though they are typical of T.D. Altman, mostly exaggerations. But they're all historical facts that he puts together, sometimes in a crazy way. But it tells you a lot about this community that we share, that we love, we call Miami. He says in one of his chapters that there was really no reason for Miami to exist, because it exists between the ocean and a body of water that we call the Everglades. And if you look at it logically with the Ulitic limestone formation, the way water runs through it, there is really no logic for human beings to be in this very narrow peninsula, which is not the peninsula of Florida. It's a 20-mile wide ring that basically goes for about 150 miles where we live in Palm Beach or Palm Beach South. Now, I mention that because you'll also see in those books what happened when Flagler came here. When Flagler came here, he had no idea what was going to happen in the future of Miami. And so when he laid out the streets, he told his engineers to be as skimpy as they could be. And that's why you see such narrow streets with narrow sidewalks and very small 300-foot blocks in downtown Miami, many of which don't make any sense because they were dead end and they were. So Miami was not laid out to be a broad boulevard, well-planned, well-thought-out city. It just wasn't. And so we just grew. And you saw the bridge that Collins built and the way Miami built, it just grew. And Miami, in over 100 years, is here because of geography. It really is, it was people from the north trying to avoid harsh winters. Cuba's 90 miles from Marathon. So geographically, this is where they were going to come. They populated South Florida, that attracted a Spanish-speaking world. This has become the capital of Latin America. It is the capital of Latin America. There's just no question about it. And so it grows. Now, the question comes, can we stop growth? A lot of people try. Nobody has been able to. Not in democracy, and certainly not in America. So we're not going to be able to stop the growth. The question is, what kind of growth do we want? What kind of growth can we have? So the issue becomes, the issues become this: accessibility, livability, quality of life, and how do we commute? Now, after I served in the legislature, I had a good friend, 2-3 more minutes, right? I had a good friend, Dick Pettigrew, who became Speaker of the House. And I don't remember whether it was Reuben Askew, who was Florida's best governor by far, or almost as good, Senator Bob Graham, who then was governor, who followed him, wonderful governors in Florida. And they got a committee, and they said, well, let's look at this. Dick Pettigrew was the chairman. He came back, and that committee's report was called Eastward Ho. And I recommend that all of you Google it and look it up. And Eastward Ho said this: listen, you're going to grow, so make up your mind. If you don't want urban sprawl, then it's going to go up. And we think that it's a lot more sensible for urban density to come into the Miami-Dade County area, and for growth to go up rather than out. So infill. When infill happens, this is the problem. See, because we are like Manhattan, we are an island, except it's a different kind of an island. And the question is, how do you get in and out? Well, Miami Beach is a double island, because you can only get to Miami Beach basically either by coming north or from four causeways. And so therefore, we really have a problem of dealing with the reality of mobility in Miami as we go up. And you see the big controversy now is in Little Havana. A group of people in Little Havana said, no, we want to be like Miami Beach, a historical based community. Well, this is not Miami Beach. This is in the core of the city. Miami Beach is 10 miles away, 8 miles of water. This is the core. So we're going to have a core. How do you deal with that? We'll, I'm sure, get into that discussion as we go.
Thanks.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm going to come around the table because I'm a trial lawyer. This is what I do. And I haven't been in trial in a while, so you're practice. Again, my name is Michael Grico. I'm not as famous as my colleague over here. And the reason I'm here, the main reason I'm here, is to protect my city and protect my residents. That's the main reason I'm here. It's not the only reason I'm here. When I moved here 20 years ago to come down to law school, I lived in the Gables, and then I lived in the Grove, and then I lived on Brickell Key, and then I moved to the beach. So I haven't always been a beach guy. So I've been in different areas of Dade County, and the one thing that I've learned over those 20 years is that this time of the Hatfield and the McCoys, this time of this is my city and this is your city, that time is over. It's time to start thinking about ourselves as a region. And the moment we start thinking about ourselves as a region, our decision-making processes change. And we don't just start thinking about ourselves, we start thinking about the collective. You know, back 100 years ago, when these cities were first built, it was just about, this is just about me, because there were only a few people here. And then 100 years later, you've got millions and millions of people living in South Florida, and the collective is no longer just a few blocks. The collective is no longer one city. The collective is, I believe we have somewhere in excess of 40 municipalities, plus unincorporated Dade, and that is the collective. So when I make a decision that impacts my neighbor, maybe I need to think twice about that. When the city of Miami makes a decision that impacts its neighbors, maybe they should think twice about that. And I really wish that Commissioner Sarnoff was here today, because I would love to have this conversation, not just privately, but publicly. Because the one thing that I've learned in my 15 months in office, and hope to be many years after, is that it's about transparency. And having things like opaque traffic studies and behind closed door meetings about projects, that's not how we do it in my city. And that's what I would expect going forward. And to hear from some of my colleagues across the water, and I'm very close with some of the commissioners in the city of Miami, to hear from some of my colleagues across the water, there are some lobbyists telling me that, listen, this is just the way it's going to be, and you guys have your own problems in Miami Beach, and you've created your own problems in Miami Beach, and you want to blame us for the problems that you have. But I'll tell you right now that this project that we're here to discuss today, and I'm sure the conversations are going to go well beyond this, but this project that we're here to discuss, the 395, that causeway, that is our neck. That is our neck, and Miami Beach is the head. And you can't get to the head without going through the neck. And we're at a point where we are a vehicular-driven area. A deference to my colleague, the mayor, talking about the city growing and growing and growing, but respectfully, London grew and grew and grew and built a subway. And unfortunately, all of my predecessors didn't have the vision to say, you know what, maybe public transportation isn't so bad. I grew up in New York, where getting on a subway or getting on a bus, it's what you do. It's part of life. It's part of how you get around, because the city was smart enough to build public transportation systems faster than they let the city build itself. And that's the difference between responsible development and responsible transportation visioning and irresponsible development and just treating transportation like it's something that, we'll deal with it when we deal with it. We're 20 years behind when it comes to public transportation. And we're at the point where people don't want to get on the bus because, first of all, the bus system is terrible. It doesn't work properly. It's dirty. And then the worst part of it is that we don't teach our youth on some level that there's no stigma attached to riding the bus. And we've started doing things in Miami Beach and even the city of Miami when it comes to the trolley system and different ways of getting creative with public transportation, but until we get there, everybody takes their car. Who here took public transportation to get here today? What was that? One? I'll tell you right now, that's about 15, 20% of the people in the room. I'll tell you right now, it's a lot more hands than I expected. But I'll tell you right now, driving here, you know, and I talk to the people that are like, oh man, it took me like an hour and a half to get here from where, I mean, it's untenable. It can't work anymore. So irresponsible development is not the way to go at this point. And that's what this is, irresponsible development based upon 15-year-old traffic studies that were barely updated and just saying, listen, we're just going to build and we're going to build and we'll build. I don't care if we build out, we build up. Truth is, we've got to slow it down. We need to press pause. We don't need to stop. We need to slow it down. We need to press pause. And we need to think about transportation first before we start adding more buildings, more traffic, more people, more apartments, more hotels, whatever the case may be. Because it's just, we only have this one life to live, and everybody in this room, we all only have one thing in common, and that's time. And whether it's time being spent in a car, or it's time on this earth, that's the only thing that we share. And we're going to wake up one day, and we're going to just realize that we've been sitting in traffic half our lives. Because this city just, it can't handle us. So, thank you.
Mix things up a little bit and go over here. I'm Steve Hurwitz. I've been living down here in Miami on Venetian Causeway for about 18 years. And because we don't have a lot of time at the moment, I want to just give you a quick snapshot of how I got to this meeting tonight. You can Google me if you want. There's more information there. It's good for insomnia. But I have spent my career at the highest levels of the federal government, worked for 5 secretaries of defense, and I was an officer of a Fortune 150 company. And since I retired, or tried to retire in 1997, I have done mostly work for not-for-profits, pro bono work for not-for-profits. One of the principal ingredients in that career, the reason I was there and trusted in those kinds of jobs, was integrity. I think you're going to hear a lot about integrity tonight. It is an issue as to why I'm standing here. Tonight we're going to talk about 2 issues. I categorize them as the merits issue and the process issues. The merits issues are things like, is this project right for the traffic and what it may do to the community? Environmental issues. The other are process issues. And process issues have to do with a government that, in my opinion, has no interest in the public's welfare or their participation, and goes to extraordinary lengths, and I'd be happy to give you some examples, to keep the public out. They do it through misstatements, through misleading comments, through backroom deals, through coaching of the developer in order to change something because it would require going back to the public, promising to fix it afterwards. The public records fight itself, for the last 20 months, has been an attempt to bankrupt me, an attempt to prevent documents from coming to light before the commission voted, despite documents which they claim existed before, but didn't show the commissioners. Attempts to scare me, attempts from lawyers writing letters that are supposed to be intimidating. Thank goodness I have lawyers who understand that as well as they do. But the whole process has been bankrupt. The whole process has been to keep the public out because some people feel that if this stuff is done in daylight, the public's not going to accept it. Now, I'm not going to accuse people for motivation as to why this has gone on for 14 years. But I'm going to tell you that a lot of people, including some very senior people in this city, who advise confidentially because they're afraid of retribution, that tell me we have to win this case because you have to stop the city of Miami from behaving this way. So tonight we're going to talk about both groups of decisions, and in terms of the merits and in terms of the process, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Brian May, and I've had the pleasure for the last 14 years of representing the Flagstone Development Group and that project that you see right behind me. I'm going to start my comments by saying I'm not really here to change anybody's mind, but I do want to put some things on the record that I think are facts. And I think we sort of get this broad stroke of the process hasn't been gone through, the process has not been followed, it lacks integrity, it lacks transparency. The one problem with that is that if you just look at the timeline of events for the approval of this project, it just doesn't meet with the facts. That's just a big problem. In 2001, there was a competitive process where developers were invited by the city of Miami to propose for this site on Watson Island. It was the city's decision back in 2001 that they wanted to develop this site. The city invited public input before the RFP ever went out. A number of developers responded. Flagstone wound up winning the selection process. They went through a public referendum in the city of Miami, a vote which is required by the city charter. I'm not sure how much more public input we could get from the city of Miami than that. And it was approved with 68% of the vote. From there, a development agreement and a lease was negotiated over a period of time. We went through numerous approvals before the city, Durham at the county, the Department of Environmental Protection, numerous federal agencies. It took us 2.5 years alone just to get the marina permit for this project. 2.5 years. During that time, Mr. Herbert sued the city of Miami and Flagstone the first time. That was in 2004. He was, the date of his first suit, I believe August of 2004. And it was around that time, just before that in May of 2004, that our MUSP, Major Use Special Permit zoning at the city of Miami, through public hearings, numerous public hearings, planning board, two before the city commission, was approved. Since 2004, we have gone back on several occasions and we have made modifications to the project, and they have been approved by the city. All of them fall underneath the city code as minor modifications, which means you don't have to go to public hearing because we're not making any major changes to the project. And as we stand here today, the project is the same as it was when it was approved back in 2001. Nothing has changed. Now, Mr. Herbert's made comments that the city coaches us through changes in our MUSP. Well, it would be insane for any developer to think about changes to a project that they've already had approved without going back to the very body that approved it and the administrative staff that approved it and ask them questions about what they're thinking about in terms of making minor modifications to the project. That's not coaching. It's called seeking input. It's called trying to play by the rules. It's called following the code and following the law. Flagstone has done that from day one, and they continue to do it today. We say, we're acting like we're here tonight and the project has not been approved. The project is approved. The marina is being dredged. The bay bottom is actually being dredged. Fill is being taken away. The seawall has been almost completely reconstructed. The upland portion of the project, utilities, things of that nature will start to be moved within a matter of months, probably by around May. Right? The marina will be finished by December. So, this isn't, we're not, for Miami, that is second to none. Now some may say that's not worthwhile. Some might say that that's not something we ought to do, and I understand that if you feel that way. The problem is that that train left the station 14 years ago when the city put this out. The developer has spent tens of millions of dollars on this project. When the real estate market crashed in 2008, he hung in there. He stayed with the project. He paid the city. In 2010, we renegotiated the lease with the city to be able to build it in phases if needed. At that time is when Mr. Herberts and the public should have stood up and said, we don't want you to do this anymore. But they didn't do that at that time. And the project was approved, and the state approved a deed waiver. All of those things are just facts. Now, yes, there's congestion on 395, I get that. But to say that this project is going to strangle 395 from the beach is, I don't know, at times now people would say it is somewhat stranglehold, right? I think all of you in this room would say we have a traffic problem on 395. I don't see anybody on the beach saying, well, we're not going to build any more condos south of 5th Street, or we're not going to expand our convention center because it might draw more traffic to the beach. I don't hear any constructive comments or ideas yet about what could we do to 395 to make it better. Mayor Ferre, with the leadership that he's provided on NPX, are doing major things. They are doing major things west on 836, which they have purview over. They're getting ready to start on a stretch from Northwest 17th Avenue to 42nd Avenue to Lejeune Road. And then after that, in around 2018, we'll start a project going east that will take it from 17th Avenue basically all the way to the water's edge right here with a signature bridge that will provide more capacity. So maybe the discussion could be, and I hope it turns into, what can we do constructively to make it better on 395? If the answer is stop development, I think to the mayor's point, that genie's been let out of the bottle. 15 years ago, the rage was, don't move the urban development boundary, please build infill housing, build infill development. That's what's being done. Yes, it creates issues. We've got to address it. So I hope we can do that tonight.
Okay, so I have a list of questions that board members of UAL have worked on that if I went through them all, we would spend the rest of our time doing those. And I know people in the audience have questions as well. But just to kind of start where Mr. May left us, and I'm going to pitch this initially to you, Mr. Urban. You heard Mr. May, this project was vetted by the city. There was an RFP that was prepared in 2001. There were bids that were solicited. Flagstone made its bid was selected, that was put to the voters in a contested referendum. The voters passed on it, and why isn't it right that we just should accept at this point the will of the voters, however wrong we might think they are, and step aside and allow the project to move forward? In the words of the former New York Mayor Ed Koch, the people have spoken, now they must be punished. This was adopted. So why isn't that right?
Well, let me start by talking about this particular phrase that Brian just used. Phrase of minor modifications. That is a fact. That is what the city called their behavior. Here, I will give you 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, as long as you want to listen, why we're in court. We're in court because when you have a referendum based on an RFP that says the project must be developed as a single unit, and you decide to change that without going back to give the previous people who were bid but lost, or anybody else that bid and lost, because it's a new project. Phase development of an $800 million project is not minor. It's not a minor change. So we are questioning whether that could be made by simply not going back to the people. There's another issue, minor modification. The charter of this city, the city's constitution, says that rent of a public space or sale must be a fair market value. When the deal was made, 2004, the rent was $2 million and it was in the referendum. But the failure to build before that, whatever the reason, the rent value has changed. In 2013, when Moss and Perez took a look at the property, the appraisal said that the rent should be around $7 million. Not charging the rent before the project is built, not amending that project, is violating the very charter of the city. That's not a minor modification. I count the difference between $2 million and $7 million, not minor. I consider, for instance, adding 140,000 square feet to a base of 220,000 square feet of retail space, not minor. I consider adding a proposed 900 parking places to 1,500, not minor. So there's a fundamental difference, and this is for a court to decide what the actual fact is in terms of the interpretation of minor. But those are just some of the kind of examples. The fact is, it was approved. There is a statement and a resolution, and I did testify in 2009, by the way. There is a statement in the resolution that they passed in extending the lease, in which it says that the reason we have to extend it is because of the lawsuits, which, by the way, ended in 2005, and the downturn in the economy, which really hit in 2009. There was no financing between 2005 and 2009. That is not a problem that the city created. It's not a problem that our lawsuits created. But the fact of that change is of such import that just to renew it and change the lease amount of the pre-construction at the construction period versus it, those are not minor modifications. The behavior that I'm referring to about statements in terms of whether or not this can stand is, we didn't sue Flagstone, by the way, now. All of my comments here talk about 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the recent changes. The city has changed, there's enough changes in the environment that the very perpetuation of this has some invalidity. But it seems to me that the key basis for the renewals are up for judicial review because of the major issues and because of the behavior, particularly in terms of documents and in terms of public access and the ability of the public, or even the commissioners, to participate in some of these decisions because of the lack of knowledge.
Okay, let me ask Mr. May just to follow up on that. The rent payment has been criticized. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. Rent payment has been criticized. I'm not speaking about you. I'm just saying one. Apparently,
I'm not paying the rent, by the way.
right.
Thanks.
Apparently, there was a $2 million annual rent. It was based on a 2002 appraisal. Evidently, more recent appraisals suggest that the market value is closer to $7 million. If you want to respond, why shouldn't the rent be adjusted?
Sure.
Given the delay in starting the project. And
Yeah.
also, I'm thinking, you know, like minor is probably in the eye of the beholder. I think is an acknowledgement that there have been some alterations to the project. Why don't you just, you've already characterized those as minor, if you could just speak to what changes have occurred from the original approved project to the current project.
Sure. First of all, let me just address the rent issue. The rent that was approved by the voters was a minimum annual rent payment of $2 million and $1 million of construction rent. That's what was approved. So let's fast forward now through the economic downturn to 2010. In 2010, when the economy's in the tank and property values are through the floor, no one came back to Flagstone at that point in time and said, hey, let's talk about the rent. let's change the rent because let's go get an appraisal on the property now. And the reason they didn't, and the reason Mr. Herbers didn't raise the issue at the time or anybody else, is because of two things. One, it was already approved by the people at the time that the original agreement to enter was approved by the city of Miami and approved by the voters. And the second was because the city's not stupid. They knew that if they went out for an appraisal at that time, it most likely would have come back below what it was in 2001, and we would have potentially wound up paying them less going forward. And that was done in 2009, 2010, right in the middle of really the throes of the bottom of the downturn. So, now, let's fast forward to 2014, when the only thing that was approved in 2014 was a reinstatement of a waiver of deed restriction with the state of Florida. Nobody reapproved the deal, nobody reapproved the agreement to enter, the development agreement, the lease, nothing. It was simply a waiver of deed restriction with the state. It was approved by the city of Miami, by the commission, and it was approved by the state of Florida. So that's really the rent issue. As it relates to changes and modifications to the project, yes, the original plans are almost 11 years old that were being filed for the months, 12 years old. So of course, between 2004 and 2014, there are going to be some modifications depending upon what's going on in the market. Here's what has not changed. There's still 221,000 square feet of destination retail that was originally approved in the referendum and approved by the voters and proposed in our original RFP. There's still 605 hotel keys. There's still the same marina proposal, the same fish market proposal, the same public space and open promenade, okay, open to the public on the waterfront. All of that is the same. We have changed some of the parking. The latest thing that we have with parking, I believe, is an addition of 200 spaces, from 1,500 to I think it's around 1,700. Okay, and as it relates to the overall size of the project, we've actually reduced the square footage from what was approved in the original months, by I think close to 50,000 square feet. Thanks. So there you go.
I'm going to pitch this question to you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
And it's more conceptual, kind of a policy-related question. What are the circumstances where publicly owned waterfront property, which is what we're talking about, should be reserved and preserved to the public versus leased out to a private developer? Mr. Mayor said, well, that ship has sailed, but I mean, going forward, what are the criteria that public decision makers should look at?
I think the bay, Biscayne Bay, is our central park. There's just no question but that it is really the center of this community is the bay. And it is, without any question, in my opinion, our biggest treasure. Now, the question is access to the bay. The city and the county and the state have a tremendous amount of land that at one time belongs to the various governments. And they have been given to the private sector for development. Bayside was one. And it continues. I think times have changed. And it's my personal opinion today that no more private deals should be made on public lands in Miami-Dade County, period. That's not to say that what was done in the past was either good or bad. Some of it was good, some of it was bad. But, you know, one of the things that I marvel at as I live in Coconut Grove by the David Kennedy Park, is what a great park that is, and how much used and how used it is. And, you know, that was a mangrove. And it wasn't easy to fill that mangrove. I mean, it was tough. And there were a lot of people. The environmental community was totally opposed and fought us tooth and nail. It was a tough You know, I gotta tell you, all these things that we're fighting about, they're all spoiled islands, you know that. They're not natural islands. That all happened because government dredged a channel and all these islands were created, including, by the way, Miami Beach, which, by the way, behind the sand dunes was all mangroves. Okay? And if you go back to when Miami Beach was built, that was a total violation of the nature of this community. In other words, we wouldn't have Miami Beach if we hadn't filled the mangroves. And we wouldn't have Kennedy Park if we hadn't filled the mangroves. We wouldn't have Bayfront Park because that was also a filled area. So a lot of these parks, you know, have been misused. For example, I think it's crazy for us to have a sewage plant on Virginia Key. Doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. We're taking water that drains to Virginia. We pump the sewage to Virginia Key. We take the water that is so scarce, we clean it up, and then we pump it out into the ocean. Doesn't make any, I mean, it's illogical. But that's the past. You know, we can't change that now. The question is, what do we do going forward? Now, these projects that are underway, and this move, for example, for no growth in Little Havana, and no growth in Little Haiti, and no growth in Overtown, well, where's Miami going to grow? If you don't want any more urban density in the inner city, then there's no other choice but to go outside and then keep on taking parts of the Everglades, and that's not going to happen. I'm totally opposed to changing the UDB line. I think we ought to change our charter, and we ought to say this is the UDB line, no changes. Now, what that implies, and be very, very, very clear as to what I'm saying, is that we have to go up. Now, the only way you can have, and the reason why European cities have such great transit systems is because of the high density of these areas. So we have to have higher density in the urban area of Miami, and that includes Miami Beach, for us to have a transit system which eventually will come. It's going to be very, very difficult. I believe that it's on its way.
Okay, so Commissioner Rico, thinking about traffic, density, you heard comments that, well, the city of Miami Beach seems concerned about this development on Watson Island and the impact that it may have on traffic on the beach, but seems less concerned about traffic impacts from the convention center, from condo development south of 5th. The city of Miami Beach did just commission a traffic study to look at the traffic impacts from this particular development, and our questions are: well, wasn't one already commissioned? What are the city of Miami Beach's concerned about the prior traffic study, and what is the status of the traffic study that you've commissioned?
Well, there's a big difference between a privately funded traffic study that they can get to say whatever they want. I've seen enough traffic studies in my 15 months in office to know that you can read a traffic study any way you want. You get a traffic study to say whatever you want. Depends on who's paying for it, depends on who's doing it. So what the city of Miami Beach has done at our own expense is we're going to be commissioning a traffic study with a company that is as far away as possible. Somebody that will never do business in South Florida except for this specific traffic study. So they'll never be concerned about getting blacklisted, they'll never be concerned about never getting any business, they don't have any friends, they don't have any enemies, and they're going to do a true, transparent traffic study. It's going to be, I'm hearing comments from So that's the difference between what we're doing and what's been done in the past. And not just in the recent past, but in the past. You know, the traffic study back when this whole project was in its infancy, when there was no port tunnel, when there was no Arch Center, when there was no museum right next to the entrance to 395. There were none of those things. And then as to the comments regarding South of 5th, and South of 5th was a redevelopment area. South of 5th was a blight of Dade County. People used to go down there and score drugs and stone crabs. But they would, I mean, you go down there and you were dodging bullets. When I moved to Miami Beach, even in the late 90s, you know, it wasn't anything what it is now, which is one of the most sought after areas in South Florida, if not the country. And as to the convention, and so a lot of that development happened in the late 1990s and in the early 2000s. So what is being built now What little is left to be built, most of them are low rises. There's no high rises being built south of Fifth. And I think the only high rise being south of Fifth is 1 unit per floor for 13 floors. It's right across from Frank's house. So, and as to the convention center, we did another traffic study. We did an independent traffic study, which is actually going to show that the convention center that we are renovating and the booking policy that we are changing is going to decrease traffic because we are encouraging conventions and not trade shows. You know, every time we have a trade show, it's all about day trippers. It's all about people coming from up north and from the mainland and bringing their cars. People don't drive to conventions with 1,000 people. They fly in. They take one trip from the airport, and then likely they never leave the beach. But you know, that's as to the convention center, and that's as to south of Fifth. So I've got a lot of ideas on transportation as it applies to 395 to also answer Mr. May's concerns, but we'll address that, I'm sure, in another question.
Well, that's actually where I was going next. The question is, how does the proposed beach light rail impact, the beach light rail impact the traffic study, and what is the beach's perception of that project? Beach light rail, Bay Lane.
Listen, in my opening statement, I talked about mass transit. I talked about public transportation. It's not a want. It's a need. You know, whether it be Washington, D.C., whether it be London, we can go through all of these cities that, and D.C. is a great example of and they don't have high rises in Washington, D.C. They don't have that. The buildings are maxed out at height. That's why you can always see the Capitol from wherever you are, because it's maxed out at height. So it's spread out, and they have a mass transit system. And it's funny, somebody actually, Basel, everybody knows about Art Basel. So Basel, Switzerland, which isn't nearly as big as the area of South Florida, I saw a picture of their mass transit system versus our transit system here, and it's embarrassing. You gotta look it up, there's like a split shot online. And it's embarrassing, just a small city like that, what they've done, because in Europe, they're forward thinking on these things. We're playing catch up. So when it comes to Bay Lake, I think that we got it wrong 10 years ago. I think it's something that we could have done and should have done for a lot less than what it's going to cost us now. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's not something that's going to happen next week, next month, or next year based upon the speed at which things happen in this county. So what we've tried to do with our intro city traffic is at least develop a trolley system. And what I'd like to do in the interim, you know, is start talking to the county and the city about extending the Metro Mover over to Watson Island. Create some area that's set aside from this project that will allow for something like the Metro Mover to come to Watson Island, and then the city of Miami Beach could extend its trolley system out over 395 and provide an alternative from vehicular single passenger car traffic trying to get across the bay, whether it be to a heat game, whether it be to work, whatever the case may be. And if anybody read in the paper this morning, the city of Miami, their very unoriginal idea of trying to do water taxis, which we're already doing in Miami Beach, we'd love to do it. You know, talking about going to Hong Kong and all of these different options when it comes to water taxis. We've got to think outside the box. But that's not happening tomorrow. That's not happening next week. So in the meantime, I don't think we should be making our problem any worse than it already is.
All right, kind of changing gears a little bit. This is for you, Mr. May. A lot of time has gone by since the referendum was initially approved, over 10 years. Flagstone has yet to deliver. At what point, if any, in your view, is skepticism about Flagstone's ability to deliver, to really bring this project to fruition, justified? How long is too long to wait?
Well, I mean, look, you know, part of what Mr. Herbert has done, right, is he has cast a shadow on this project. Whether it's justified or not justified, I'm sure he believes it is, and I understand that. But, you know, his constant badgering of the project doesn't help it when it goes out into the market to try to get things done. It leads to a lot of misinformation, and those are always issues and problems for the project. All I can tell you is when, you know, back in 2011, it was, well, when are you going to start? When is it going to happen? Well, we're here. It started. It's happening. And now people are saying, but it's not delivered yet. I mean, they just started breaking ground in August of last year, and people are asking us why you haven't built it yet. Well, it's actually being built. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It has a scheduled completion date of 2017. It should be finished by then. Everything is moving along according to plan and according to schedule. But we have another lawsuit to fight off. In the meantime, that's attempting to hold us up, you know.
So one man's
We're doing
badgering,
the best we can, right?
one man's badgering is another
Yeah.
man's like
And
standing
one
for
thing
their
I'd like
rights.
to say also is in the modification of the lease in 2010, one of the things that the developer did is he began to pay what's called pre-construction rent, which he started paying the city rent for a piece of property that he had not touched or actually started construction on. He wasn't required to do that by virtue of the referendum. He wasn't required to do that by virtue of his agreement with the city, but he stepped up and he did it. And to date, since 2010, he's paid the city over $3.5 million in rent. Now, you know, to say that he hasn't put his best foot forward or put his money where his mouth is, I think is just not fair to him, you know? And if you want to stop the project, write the guy a big check, because he has a lot of money invested in it. But it's not fair to him to say all the woes of traffic and everything that's going wrong on 395 is due to a project that hasn't even started yet.
So, question for Steve, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Mr. Herbert, you've been criticized for having sort of a NIMBY attitude about this project, and I just want you to respond to that and to explain why this project should matter to those who don't commute on 395 or otherwise live in the sight line of the project.
Good point. Let me, Commissioner Sarnoff had the grace to accuse me from his podium on the bench of the commission to say that I was doing this just because of my view. In fact, their current lawyers have attacked me for that in private communication, at least they think it's private, threatening with tortious interference with their case because I'm fighting this because of my view. They're partly right, but it's not the view they think it is. I'm not worried about what I see out my window. The view that I'm worried about is the way this city has behaved with this project. It is the behavior over these last 5 years that raises such hackles with me and based on who I am in my career. And I will give you an example. Constant badgering, traffic studies. Alice Bravo, the deputy city manager, City of Miami, stood in front of the state cabinet, acting as trustees, when the issue of traffic was before them following in terms of their needing to extend this in May. My name is Alice Bravo. I'm the deputy city manager. I know you're concerned about traffic. This is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. We have a traffic study from 2013, and that study shows that this project's okay. Problem number one, the city never saw that study, according to her, in her deposition, under oath, after that hearing. She basically said to the cabinet, I'm an official and I'm telling you the study's okay. In the deposition, she says, I did not see that study until it was handed to me by the lobbyist the morning of the state hearing. Yet she poses it as if it had been reviewed and had been accepted and was a legal document that says that study was valid to draw the conclusion, which I am sharing with you as the cabinet, that this study says it's okay. That is misrepresentation. It is a violation of the Citizens' Bill of Rights in this county, and it will be pursued because it misled a governing body. Now, the fact is that that 2013 study, which we got subsequent, despite the fact that we had asked for basically all that material from the summer of 2013 into 2014, we got after the hearings. The commissioners apparently didn't see it either. Apparently no one in the city. We got it, we gave it to experts who say that the study's not relevant. It's not relevant because they start measuring traffic after you leave 395. Not on 395. There's no impact on Biscayne and what it may do to that area. No impact on the beach. And that the methodology used for technical reasons, and that study is referenced and will be, it's on our website, of the merit, traffic, the merit issue, traffic in the process, make a difference. And that Brian mentioned the May hearing, it was not a hearing to approve anything other than the waiver. That discussion led to the testimony that I made there and my attorney made, raised a discussion among the members. And this is, what I'm about to tell you can be verified. Please go to the Miami City website, go to the hearing and watch it. It's recorded. Commissioners started raising issues about shouldn't we change this? And there was a discussion about it. And Commissioner Sarnoff gets out of his chair, walks over to the assistant city attorney, and they talk privately. He sits down, and he then says, won't we be sued if we change this program? She says yes. He said, how much? And he said, why? Because we have a good faith clause. And then he says, how much? And she says, $58 million. Let me tell you 4 things about that statement. Number 1, she as a city attorney in a public space is admitting essentially liability for the city. Talk to your lawyers about whether you think that's a good idea or not. Secondly, she didn't say the legal opinion of this department is that we probably could be sued, etc. Instead, she asserted that they would be sued. The third problem was that she said because of the good faith clause. The good faith clause was no longer in existence in 2014 because of the failure of the developer to meet his half of the good faith clause in paying the appropriate rents that were set, even with the revisions down for him, and with the state, who also complained, the State Department of Environmental Protection complained about it. So she asserted that the good faith clause was the basis of it, when that is a judicial issue, I promise you. And the fourth thing, she asserted that it was $58 million. We did a public records request of her the next day, and essentially the public records show that she did not have a single piece of paper in her file that described or developed that, and that she informally has said that that's the number she was told. She asserted that as fact before the commission vote. And finally, no matter how you measure what he has spent on this, the good faith clause did not go into effect until 2010. The money spent before that was his risk. The city couldn't possibly be liable for $58 million from 2010 until then. So the fact that, yes, constant badgering, I guess that's who I am. I don't give up easily. But I want to hear what a court has to say about a vote in which 2 commissioners at that point said, relying on what you've just told us, assistant attorney, we are not going to vote for this, where they were skeptical.
Thank you. Mr. May, if you want to respond, you don't have to. Okay, so we're going to open it up to the public at this point, and we'll kind of work our way from the back forward. John, you have a question?
Yeah. Question for all of you. What benefit, I live in Miami, what benefit is that project to me as a resident of Miami, as opposed to the people who are going to spend millions of dollars in those condominiums to live here, and the people who are coming from out of town, I presume, who have the money to pay for that, for those jobs? What benefit is there to me as a resident of Miami to have that
Well,
project?
we're just doing the same order?
Well, I mean, does anybody want to try and tackle that?
Sure,
Or
John, come on. I mean, this is something that was decided, what, 15 years ago? You're asking us,
Apart from the...
are you asking rhetorically?
Rhetorical.
15 years ago, was it a good idea? Well, the people of Miami voted for it. So, you know, and that was openly debated, that was totally discussed. I gotta tell you, I voted against it. But the people, 68% of the people of Miami who had the opportunity to vote for it, voted for it. So, you know.
Well, there was a case that was made to the public about why this was a good thing for the city of Miami. Do you want to re-articulate that now, Brian? Do you have it?
Sure, I'll do it again. I've only done it about 300 times since 2001. Here comes 301. The city's vision was to have the anchor of this site be a mega yacht facility, which at the time they determined through market study that this was a place that would be a magnet for mega yachts from across the world, which now are going elsewhere, usually to the islands, some would say Fort Lauderdale, but at this time, in 2001, we had very little dockage for mega yachts, and today we still have very limited dockage for mega yachts. So having the first mega yacht facility of this kind in North America still today in 2015 is, a lot of people would say, is a very positive thing. And if you saw the economic impact of those boats coming here with their crews, spending their money, restocking, refueling, doing all those things, you know, you could certainly make a case for that.
So there you go, John. You have a place to park your mega yacht.
One correction. Well, I'm finished. There's no condominiums here. These are 605 hotel rooms. 150 of those are fractional ownership. So you can come in and, I hate to use the word, but it's the only way I know how to describe it, because the developer doesn't like to use the word, but timeshare is in essence what it would be.
Yes, Commissioner.
And he left out a couple 100,000 square feet of destination retail, which is of no benefit to you, or me, or anybody in this room.
Yes, Frank.
Good evening, and thank you for...
Yeah, thanks for coming, Frank.
Without question. Last minute notice of all, it's wonderful. And to Mayor Ferrera, in respect, and to all that you mentioned, about mass transit, the transit system definitely needing to be a necessity, not necessarily an option. Without question, comes into play who or how is it paid for.
Right.
I will just use the example what's going on in the Washington D.C. area with the Dulles expansion.
Right.
And the Expressway Authority up there
Right.
that's actually paying for
With tolls.
through the tolls, and we all know there's way too many tolls on the MDX expressway system. However, not to point the finger at you, Mr. Mayor, but hopefully you would spearhead, and you can tell this group tonight in respect to help one of the solutions to the possible transportation problems is to have MDX commit, or at least propose to pay for transit to go to, and when I say transit, I mean either light rail or heavy rail to the beach. Like it should.
Right, let me tell you that I am totally and strongly opposed to any tolls. So far, Miami-Dade County has found no ways to fund that. Now, let me tell you what I do think makes sense. The coming thing, one of the things that I got, Paul, from your wonderful session that you sponsored a couple of weeks ago, is bus rapid transit. But bus rapid transit is not what everybody thinks it is. Properly done, and I'll tell you how important this is. The Knight Foundation has now retained a guy that does nothing but study bus rapid transit. And guess where they're going? But here's what here's the way you have to look at it. Here's how these buses operate. They operate like trains. What's that mean? Well, it goes 55 miles an hour guaranteed. Okay? When it gets to a place, it's a station. You don't go down the steps. In other words, it's a double articulating door, just like a subway. You get off at the same level. It's a sheltered space, just like a Metro Rail station. So it's everything like Metro Rail, except that it's buses. In other words, instead of steel on steel, it's rubber on cement. Now, why does that make sense? Because to do that and to operate it, that system costs 5% of what it costs to operate Metro Rail. Metro Rail is 20 times more expensive, and light rail is 10 times more expensive, and there's no way that we have that kind of money to do it. Now, why not $5.95? There are a couple of reasons. First of all, it'll take you, and I guarantee it, I serve on the Florida Transportation Commission. I see this continually. I've been there for the last 3 years. I served before in many other transportation capacities, going back to a lot of trials and rapid transit and so on. Anyway, And you wouldn't have the people over here if it hadn't been for me pushing it from the city of Miami and on and on and on. So I've been there and I know about transportation. I want to tell you that to get a permit to do a light rail system to Miami Beach, according to our experts, will take no less than 8 years. You're dreaming, it's not going to take 8 years. It would take 2.5 years to get a permit for this dredging. You're talking about 10 years. So there's no financing. It'll take 10 years to do, and you can't wait 10 years. Now, 595 is 395 is not the location. You know where you're going to do this? In 195. And the reason why 195 is important is because there's plenty of space. It goes into the mid-beach, and then you can connect it to Miami International Airport. And that's what we're working on with your city manager, MDX, and your mayor and the capable commission of Miami Beach. We're trying to figure out a way to get bus rapid transit from the airport to middle to Central Beach, and I think that's
There'll be a lot of people want to do a rebuttal, but I will. I'm grateful for leaders like Mayor Jimenez, Mayor Levine, Commissioner, who are dedicated to making a light rail connection to the beach a reality, and we'll have it within 10 years. Including that MDX will end up contributing to it. Because they just doubled our tolls and they got a lot of people upset about that. and that will happen. Over your objection, but it will happen. Yes, Peter.
I'd like to ask a question, Commissioner Rico. My name is Peter Ehrlich. I live in the city of Miami. But my question is, if the city of Miami Beach impartial independent traffic study determines that this project would have massive or very damaging traffic to the city of Miami Beach, and if it's determined that the developer has been trying to increase the density and intensity of the existing approvals, what steps will the city of Miami Beach be taking to try to bring the project back to the 2001 level?
I got 3 calls from the city attorney before I got here. So I have to refrain on the answer right now. So I refer you back to the city commission meeting from 2 weeks ago. So, but other than that, I don't want to. We're not going to make any promises or commitments as to what we're going to do. But I'll tell you that we're going to do something.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you're
Yes.
raising your hand.
Hi, my name is Richard Strell. A few comments. One regarding the rapid buses. The city can't get cars to not block intersections at red lights, so a guarantee that a bus can go 55 miles
On
an hour.
expressways only.
Oh, I see. Well, that doesn't solve intercity transit. And I was very involved with Miami 21. And what I found during that process is I developed the kind of outrage that I'm hearing from you regarding the process. Because what we found is that the city went to great effort to keep from the public what they were doing with upzoning the city. They in fact greatly upzoned the city far beyond what their initial claims were. And Miami 21 had started with the premise that it was holistic plan that included mass transit, which would justify increasing the density. And in fact, they left the mass transit plan out. So when people talk about mass transit, they talk about high density and high rise in cities, and they talk about that being the case, for instance, in Europe. That mass transit system was in place in London and Paris way before there were high rises. So more density and high rises in a city make sense rather than spreading out, but it doesn't make sense when there is no mass transit to accommodate it. And that really gets to the project, which really, to me, isn't addressing it. I voted for that thing, and I didn't even know what it was until afterwards because of the wording. So when you talk about 68%, I had just moved here, and I didn't realize how much the city works to deceive the public. So yes, I voted for that, but I was shocked later when I really learned what it was. And that was actually the first plan for that thing. So from the standpoint of transparency, it doesn't exist in the city. Thank you.
People may not have known what they were voting for. That's not a shock. Yes.
Brad Knopfler. I just want to say, first of all, that it's very symbolic that there is no representation from our elected officials, nor from the city of Miami, which has been approving and pushing this project for the past 14 years. And going back to the process issues, it seems very, very much sort of a pattern of practice that we've been living as representatives of the community in downtown the city of Miami. We've dealt with the global agreement, the Marlin Stadium, pushed through with so little public comment. We have issues with the World Center project right now. We have issues with this. And while I understand, Mr. May has some very, very good points, you've been here 300 times talking about, we've never seen you in the community. I don't think anybody in Miami Beach has ever seen you. Why don't we have, if you guys are so sure of the merits of your project and the impact, why are you reaching out to the community? Why aren't you talking to us intelligent individuals as opposed to
with all due respect,
legal? Mr. Greco is here with the revenues, has constraints based on the city attorney. Why is it Sarnoff here?
I have no idea why Commissioner Sarnoff is here.
Thank you.
And I'm not responsible for whether he could be here or not, but I'm happy to be here.
We're happy you came.
Yeah, listen, you do have to, I guess, reach out some, right? But that process did take place back in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. There are public hearings. They're advertised. It's not the developer's responsibility to run into the community and tell everybody, honestly. It's the community's responsible to tune in and to be active and to be involved, and I'm glad that all you were here being involved. That's a good thing. But there were plenty of public hearings on this project, all the way through 2014. To assert that they weren't and there's no public input, it's just wrong. It's just not factual. I mean, I can give you a timeline of public hearings that stretch from 2001, 2002, 2003, 4, 7, 9, 10, 14. I mean, numerous and numerous public hearings. So we are fulfilling our responsibility as a developer.
All right, Brad. Yes, go ahead.
Hadley Williams. I also support the lawsuit because I, along with many others in this room, have suffered exactly what you've been suffering. And as an example, public hearings typically are announced the day before the public hearing, as an example.
My name's Al Crespo. First off, think about this. We're talking about just a little piece of land here. How many of you are aware that within the next 2 years, there's going to be 32 passenger trains going up and down the railroad tracks not far from here? There's going to be 24 freight trains going from the port every day. If they arrange it, there's also going to be tri-rail running up and down there. What's that going to do to the inner city traffic? See, the bigger problem, the reason I came here, is inner city traffic. 10 years from now, doesn't matter. If you're stuck on Biscayne Boulevard and 36th Street, if you're stuck trying to get over the Brickell Avenue Bridge, last Friday afternoon, at 5 o'clock, I was stuck on Washington and 5th Avenue. I was the second car from the intersection. The red light change went through a complete cycle 6 times before I whipped around, got in the left turn lane, and forced my way through to be able to get across 5th Street. And then I went to a police officer and said, why don't you have a policeman out there? This is the problem that I think all of us are really concerned with. This is a specific problem, but there's a far more arching problem that affects us every single day. And all the infill that's going on is, like was pointed out, we don't have an infrastructure underneath the infill to accommodate the people that are coming into the streets every day as part of that infill. That's what needs to be addressed now, I believe. That's a real serious problem for all of us and all the people who are driving out here every day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And that's my comment.
Thanks, Al. Thank you. I have one answer for you. One word.
Yes.
Bicycle. Rick. Mr. Overland.
I have a question for David Ray, Mr. Greco, and for Brian May.
That's everybody.
No, I'm leaving out Herbert's group.
Okay.
And it's so good to see Mayor Frey after all these years. You may recall Dan Hall and I had many
adventures with you.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Let's assume that there is a problem with an anachronistic development, one that's approved in, say, 2000 or 2001, when the urban density is much lower on both sides of the causeway, and where other conditions are changing, and that the development is on the causeway that connects two cities. What would you think the responsibility of the city of Miami would be to deal with the problems that the project could cause? And what is the responsibility of the city of Miami Beach to cooperate with Miami, for the two cities to cooperate together? And then the second part of my question is to Mr. May. Let's assume the developer understands that things have changed and the traffic's already terrible, as anybody knows. What is the responsibility of the developer to act in the public interest to mitigate this or somehow deal with this problem that flows from a development that takes so long to germinate during a period of intense urban development?
I think I understood that there were a couple of words, anachronistic, germinate, that kind of got me, but I think the issue is the project hasn't changed, but the surrounding environment has over a 14-year period.
Real quick, simple answer. The responsibility is not the city of Miami's or Miami Beach. It belongs to metropolitan Miami-Dade County, and it also belongs to the state of Florida, who has that responsibility. That's a state road. In other words, this solution can't come from the city of Miami Beach or Miami. We don't have the kind of money to solve the problem. It's only the state with federal funds and Miami-Dade County. And Miami-Dade County has been absent in the last 50 years in solving any major highway or transit issues other than the transit system, which, as you know, only serves 4% of the people who commute in Miami-Dade County.
Commissioner Grieco, you have?
Yeah, I adopt the mayor's comments. It's half of Miami Beach within the city itself, it's either a state road or a county road. All of our major arteries, for the most part, are out of our control, except for Washington Avenue. But Alton Road and all these roads that you hear about, those are state roads, county roads. So we're very hamstrung in the city of Miami Beach regarding controlling what goes on there. But this goes back to, again, to one of my opening statements, which is it's about thinking about the collective beyond your own city. And I've reached out to several of the commissioners in the city of Miami and with Miami-Dade County that I have relationships with to get them thinking about this in a more holistic, no Hatfields, no McCoy kind of thing. My concern is, the third part of your question is how should a developer deal with it? My understanding is the developer is asked to make their project bigger. And that's pending right now. So I tender the floor to Mr. May to answer why they want to add more square footage to their project.
They want to do it to make money.
Absolutely. There was a profit
Anybody who would take
motive.
risks to build that certainly will want to make money. They would be a moron not to want to make money after making an investment to build something like that.
May I say something?
Okay, hold on.
You have to.
Do you have any
Sure,
specific response to the question?
Look,
I think the way I understood the question was a little different than the
I get
response, which is, the project made sense, assume all the approvals were appropriate at the time.
Sure.
But as time went on, the landscape is now altered, and the approvals that were obtained legitimately in 2004 would not be given today because the landscape surrounding the project is changed.
First of all, I don't believe that's correct.
I'm not saying that as a fact.
There's a lot of conjecture, there's a lot of speculation to that effect, but I don't believe that's correct. And when they do conduct a traffic study, I don't think they're going to find the kind of impacts that they think they're going to find. But if they do, we'll try to address it, right? Now, as part of our must-go, I want you to understand, it is the responsibility of the developer to improve the ingress and egress to their development and onto the island. And as part of our must, and as part of our plan, we are required to do that. We are required to make improvements, getting off of 395, making sure there's proper circulation to our parking. The fact that we're adding 200 parking spaces is a good thing. It means that people, when they get to the project, won't be backed up trying to find a parking space because we're providing more than required parking. I think ultimately that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing for the community. If the community's going there or tourists are going there, it's a good thing that they can find a place to park. And it's a good thing that the developer, as part of the approval, is making those improvements of ingress and egress, both, you know, on and off the island.
You had a question? Go ahead.
Yes, Charles Corner, Coconut Grove. You focus on the wrong thing here. This is what developers do. Now, I'm an architect, I work with developers. I'm not crazy about this project. But this is what they do. They are out to maximize their income. You shouldn't be surprised by that. They're going to spend their lives doing that. The problem is we have a morally corrupt and intellectually deficient governance. That's where the problem lies. They don't care about the future. They don't act on accommodating the density they're allowing. All this conversation, to a large degree, is a moot point. You've got to remember this on election day.
Hey, Mr. Hoyer, by the way, that was my campaign slogan.
I missed it. I'm not on the beach. But that's the bottom line here. It's time. I've been in Coconut Grove for 34 years. I've seen it change. I was thinking today, on the way up here, when I first moved here, I lived in Canada for 6 months. It used to take 15 minutes to get downtown. I don't know what it takes now, an hour and a half to get downtown during rush hour from Kendall. There's no planning because there's no pressure for the plan. That's where it belongs.
Sure. Yes, go ahead. We'll take a couple more questions and we're going to wrap up.
My name is Seth Splary. I'm a candidate for City of Miami Commissioners. I'm trying to understand how we can solve some of these problems. You know, it seems that we have rampant runaway development all throughout, you know, the Salami area and through this urban corridor, with no thought to infrastructure to accommodate the traffic. And, you know, I've given up. I'm on a bicycle. And I commute often to Miami Beach. Half the time I get off the bus and hop on a bicycle, and I get there faster than the bus does for the last mile or two. But I'd like to hear solutions from all of you. What do you think, honestly, as human beings, what do you think, or what do you propose as a solution, given the fact that we're going to have a lot more residential buildings built, more commercial buildings built right in this area, and the traffic is gridlocked as it is, and it's going to get worse. What can we do to solve this?
I'd like to briefly take
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure that constructive, right, this is constructive. As, you know, it's a very good point. Bus rapid transit, I happen to agree with the mayor, I think is the only way that this community will be able to move people east and west and across our thoroughfares in any kind of economical way. The idea of building heavy rail or light rail down 395, it's a great idea, but it is going to take a long time. It's going to be super expensive, and I guarantee you that the cost overruns on the project are going to be astronomical, because it's not going to be easy to try to build a rail system down there. Bus rapid transit is a great solution, but we have a problem in that the community is adverse. There's a stigma to riding a bus, right, in Miami-Dade County, because people are typically used to getting in their cars and driving places. And I'm talking about people across the community, from Miami Beach to Kendall, right where you are. Necessity is the mother of invention. Why do I take my car from an office in Coral Gables and get on a train at Douglas Station or University to go downtown? Because it's easier. Because I don't want to sit in traffic on US 1. Because I don't want to have to cut through the back streets of the city of Miami and try to figure it out. I go to the station, get on a train, get on my phone, do some work, get on the computer, whatever. I can do that on the way. Necessity is the mother of invention. if we can figure out how people can feel comfortable getting on a bus rapid transit system and also on trolleys. We've seen a lot of success with trolleys, but they're still limited in the community. Coral Gables has a great trolley system. The city of Miami has some very good trolley system. The beach is now developing it, and they should get kudos for it. We need more of it. And it shouldn't be free to ride the trolley. You should have to pay 50 cents or $1 to get on the trolley, because you're going to pay $3 to drive downtown. So that's the kind of stuff.
In response to that question, we did have a transportation summit a couple of weeks ago. The answer is there's not one answer, right? Different modalities of transportation, allowing people to be those that can bike, pedestrian. What we have to break is the idea of single occupant vehicles getting from point A to point B. Because we all know that doesn't work anyway. So you have to build the infrastructure to give people other options, including light rail and BRT. All of those things are options. Last question.
Hi, I'm Marta Sayas from Little Havana. And I've noticed a couple of things, but what comes to my mind first is that funny movie about the baseball players. If you build it, they will come. So they keep coming because we keep building it, and we keep augmenting the problem that we already recognize exists. I have a problem with that logic. I'm looking around here, and I see people that are architects and lawyers. You guys are really prepared and giving it a good fight. And we're fighting in Little Havana, the same thing. We're not as prepared as you guys are. And I think that at a certain point, the people that are responsible to protect us and the people that we elect, and thank you, Commissioner, I think that they have to understand and weigh what we want and the quality of life that we deserve, whether we're rich or poor, has to be put into the plan. Because I don't accept that just because you're poor, now you have to go and live in a high-rise because you can't live in a modest, nice 3-story building. And that you can't, drive normally like anybody would. Let's say you had to go to the hospital. Well, now you have to catch the bus and you have to get in the bicycle. It just doesn't work that way here. So we should be realistic and we should continue building it because they will continue to come and because we are not ready.
Here's what I'd like to do. First, I want to thank our panelists for their participation. I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and he's going to close us out. Thank everyone for coming.
I have a final question. I hope that's all right, because I'm sure I'm ready to go. There's something that we're experiencing called sea level rise. That has not been addressed here, and I want to thank Albert for reminding us of that. How does that enter into this at this stage?
Big time.
I mean, and how does that enter into a lot of our calculations, parcel B, a lot of other aspects of our waterfront? I don't think it's really considered very seriously at all. It's like distant future. People don't think about it. Relates to Virginia Key, of course, all sorts of issues.
Those luxury yachts are sitting pretty.
That's right. No, we're going to live on them. Thanks.
That's my key question, and then I'd like to thank everybody too, and ask you to please join me.
There'll be squatters on the yachts. Greg, in the late 1930s, all Americans, the vast majority of Americans, were opposed to the United States getting involved in the European War. Right. We had already been through that. We didn't want to see that again. The hell with Germany, the hell with England. We couldn't care less about France. That's their problem. We can't get involved. And our great president, Franklin Roosevelt, would tiptoe. Because nobody wanted to accept that this was a disaster that was happening to Poland and eventually to France and to the rest of Europe, and that we eventually had to be involved. Nobody wanted to accept it. Well, nobody wants to accept the fact that this place is going to be underwater in 30 or 40 years. The insurance companies don't want to deal with it. The politicians don't want to deal with it, and the bankers don't want to deal with it. And guess what? As long as somebody's willing to give you some money to build an apartment, and you get permission to build an apartment, they're going to build them. And let me tell you, ma'am, I sympathize with your concern, but guess what? No growth? That ain't going to happen in America. I don't think it's going to happen anywhere. When I was in 1970, I was a county commissioner, a city commissioner, and I went to Russia, and in the meeting of all the major municipalities in Moscow, they said, we can't control the number of people that come into Moscow and Kiev. If the communist dictatorships of 1970 couldn't control people coming into Moscow and Kiev, how are we going to control people coming into Miami?
Corruption.
Hurricanes. It's going to happen. They're going to come despite the hurricanes. They're going to come despite the salting of the seas. They're going to despite, what can I tell you? The best thing we can do is prepare, be aware and prepare as best we can.
I have one comment to make. I'm representing Citizens Climate Lobby. We're trying to do something about sea level. If you would like to send a message to your congressman, I will guarantee it will be delivered on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody will sign it.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of the people in Miami-Dade County will sign it.
Any other comments?
Just briefly, I mean, most people know that in the city of Miami Beach, we've actually committed somewhere in excess of $300 million to protect our city. We've changed our thinking. There was a kind of a dark ages thinking in the way of dealing with sea level rise. And Miami Beach, as was commented earlier, it was built. And it's built on porous limestone. We can't build seawalls and just kind of build walls around ourselves because the water even comes up from under us. So for us, we're in the process of building an elaborate pumping system, which is going to hold us above water for an extended period of time. We're putting about 40 or 50 pumps throughout the city, starting with what we would call the hot spots and working our way over. But we can't self-fund forever. Even our mayor was up in D.C. just recently, fighting for federal funds for us because we really are at ground zero. So we're taking it seriously on the beach, and we're one of the first cities, if not, I believe, the first city on the East Coast to be doing something like this because we're scared and we're experiencing it now. It's not something that's 10, 20 years from us, we're experiencing it now. And to answer your question, in Miami Beach, we have a law that developers cannot donate to political campaigns. You should have that everywhere.
Something that make a huge difference. Necessity is the mother of invention. The idea is that there are 47 condos in Miami-Dade County that have been approved, that have not begun construction, that are within 3 blocks of the ocean or on the bay. Someone needs to look at those plans and say, wait a minute, at this point, science in 2014, it knows what it wants, and it needs to look at the plans of all 47 of those buildings and say, let's make sure that these are going to be built with the context of today's science of sea rises.